What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to another video about the UFL. The United Football League is starting to round its season out, and we are in week 8. It's my weekly power rankings and predictions here. We're going to talk about all 8 teams in the UFL, where I think they sit in my power rankings, and then predict every game that's going to be happening in the UFL this upcoming weekend. Hey, half of the playoff field is already set. I'll talk about the 2 teams that have already clinched playoff spots, and maybe what needs to happen in the other division for those playoff spots to be clinched. But before we do that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the love and support the channel has seen. And I promise, as soon as I get some more graphics and things made, the college football content will be really starting to roll out. We're going to talk about a lot of things before the season kicks off and before predictions kick off, which, hey, if you're a college football fan, I'm doing all 134 FBS teams, which means I'm doing your favorite team. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to see when your favorite team gets uploaded. If you're a UFL fan, welcome. Again, if you're a college football fan, I'll be posting a lot more college football content down the line too. But anything you can do to help support the channel does mean a lot to me. But with all that out of the way, let's dive on in now into talking about the United Football League Week 8. And the team that has been at the top the entire season remains at the top. The Birmingham Stallions got their biggest test of the season so far, and they were able to prevail. Some late second heroics, some last-minute drives. St. Louis really was controlling most of that game, but a couple gaffes from St. Louis and just some excellent play from Birmingham and a phenomenal game from Adrian Martinez helped the Stallions seal this game. Adrian Martinez, I believe, had 3 or 4 touchdown passes in that game against St. Louis. This is the Stallions defense that was able to force some sacks, able to get some tackles for loss, but they also picked off A.J. McCarron, which is a very, very rare feat. Adrian Martinez may very well have just passed A.J. McCarron in terms of the front runner for the MVP of the league. Now, the Stallions' 26 points they gave up was the most points they have given up all season. They gave up the second most points of the season last week against Memphis, but those numbers are not there to tell you that this defense is declining by any means. No, the defense was fantastic. Like I said, they were getting those tackles for loss. Hey, they picked off A.J. McCarron, which is something that only one other team can say this year. And first of all, it was just a great, phenomenal game, but Adrian Martinez is really shining as this QB1. There are a ton of other weapons that are starting to perform really, really well, or I guess have been performing really well, that are continuing to play well. Deion Kane, Marlon Williams, that running back duo of Person and Maribel. And again, this defense just really, really good. I can't say enough good things about the Birmingham Stallions. We'd be here all day, but the defense played really, really well, and Adrian Martinez showing up as that number 1 quarterback and just playing the way that he did with his legs, with his arm. He was excellent all game long. A big reason why Birmingham won that game, as well as starting to take over that game as it got down into its late stages, the late score at the end, and then the late defensive stop as well. Really was a great team effort, and the Stallions have won their 7th game. They already clinched a playoff spot, but the team that they beat in St. Louis, I'm still sticking there at the number 2 spot. There we go. So they did drop to 5-2 now, but again, you lose to the Birmingham Stallions. Not too much of a concern there, but you have to think, if you are St. Louis, you are so close to winning that game. You were really, really close. And the offense just wasn't as productive as it normally is. It was just an all-around struggle for St. Louis, especially offensively, even though they were on top in the scoreboard for a good portion of that game. Despite the lack of offense, A.J. McCarron really was shut down by that Birmingham Stallions secondary. Now, the run game has started to be really, really good, and Jacob Sailors has emerged as that running back 1 with Mateo Durant still hurt. A.J. McCarron still very much a guy that's in a front runner spot, one of the 2 now with Adrian Martinez, in my opinion, to win the UFL MVP. But when you talk about St. Louis, like, look, this defense is still tops in the league in a ton of categories. Birmingham just has a lot of weapons, and slowing down that dual threat ability of Adrian Martinez is a very, very hard thing to do. St. Louis was controlling this game despite the offense maybe not necessarily being where it has been in the past couple of weeks, especially that 45-12 win against DC, whom they play again this week. but you were really, really close to a win. What happens if McCarron doesn't throw that pick? What happens if you're able to convert that 4th and 2 there at the end of the game? What happens if AJ McCarron's scramble goes for more than 1 yard and you don't have to waste that 3rd down play? If you had a timeout left, again, we could go through the what ifs all day, but the point being, St. Louis really is that close. The fact that they didn't play their best football and they almost beat the best team in the league on the road says something about this Battlehawks team. They are a tried and true championship contender, and if those two teams see each other in the UFL championship game, I do expect it to be another really good, really fun game. We'll talk a little bit more about the quarterback situations. AJ McCarron may not play. I mean, he took a ton of big hits in that last game there against the Birmingham Stallions. He was on the turf quite a bit, and they did just sign a new quarterback there as well. Drew Plitt, the Old Ball State quarterback. But regardless, a ton of the weapons are playing well. The defense is still playing really good. St. Louis, last week they showed us they're a bona fide pride and true championship contender. The number 3 spot has changed for me. The Michigan Panthers, welcome to the number 3 spot. A dominant 22-9 win over the DC Defenders. And the defenders just couldn't really get anything done. But that is a huge credit to what the Panthers were able to do, especially when controlling the run. Matt Colburn was electric that past weekend. He was really, really good. Wes Hill's probably still not probably still, he is still a really, really good option in this backfield, has 5 touchdowns on the year, for goodness sake. But Matthew Colburn was outstanding in that previous game against DC, and run game domination doesn't just mean with the offense. No, that means with the defense as well. Michigan was stout on that defensive front. They did not let DC get really much of it. Excuse me. They didn't really let DC get much of anything on the ground at all. In fact, I don't think DC had a player who had more than 3 carries. They were trying to do everything they could, like run wide receiver screens and jet sweeps and things like that. And Michigan was still able to hunt it down, albeit for a couple of plays. But for the most part, they were really, really good. The defense got pressure to Jordan Tayamu. They actually forced him out of the game with a really big hit from Breland Speaks. Now 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, proving himself to be one of the better defensive ends in the United Football League. But the offense still needs some consistency. You didn't see EJ Perry or Danny Etling play. I didn't have the 2 quarterbacks, Perkins and Lewerke, that did play, because it was Matt Colburn that really drove the offense and helped them win this game, and the defense was really stout as well. Michigan is a great physical team. They got some great physicality, especially on that defensive front. That's going to continue to show out for the rest of the season. They are the other team that has clinched down a playoff spot. So the Michigan Panthers will be playing the Birmingham Stallions back-to-back weeks. They'll have to go on the road in the final week of the regular season before rematching again, more likely than not in Birmingham again, for that second leg of, or I should say the second leg of the back-to-back, which happens to be in the UFL playoffs. Michigan has been one of the surprises this year. They've been a really, really good side. You got Memphis and Houston coming up. Likely should go ahead and push you to 7-2 before that game against the Birmingham Stallions. Can you get consistency offensively, especially from the quarterback position? You have a great weapon in Marcus Sims. Colburn and Wes Hills are going to continue to do their thing, and your defense is starting to play really, really well. It's that quarterback position that they have to lock down. I've been harping on it all season with this team, but hey, they've been one of the surprises here, 5-2, clinching a playoff spot, and number 3 in my power rankings. We move on to number 4, and this is where I have the San Antonio Brahmas. So this team still sits at 5-2. It was another Brahma comeback this past week. They were down for a lot of that game there against Houston. In fact, I think they were up 3-0. Then Houston had the field goal there, and Houston ended up leading 12-3 with quite a bit of time left. San Antonio just couldn't get anything going offensively at all. Quentin Dormady did not look great. Through another pick, now has a 2-1 interception to touchdown ratio. So you put the interceptions first, then the touchdowns, and I mean, all in all, Quentin Dormady has just really struggled trying to step in for Chase Garbers. he just has not been what Chase Garbers was at all. Now, they did switch to Kevin Hogan, and while he didn't necessarily have the best stat line, he was able to help this team along a lot better than what Quentin Dormady did throughout that game. Again, it was another Brahma comeback win. I'll tell you how they did it. A 3-point conversion. Yes, a 9-point game is still a one possession game in the UFL, of course. So they ended up getting that 3-point conversion. I believe it was Cody Latimer that ended up catching it. Houston, a muffed kickoff, there was a fumble on the kickoff to which San Antonio recovered. They were able to get a couple more yards. And as the time expired, Ryan Santoso, a game-winning 51-yard field goal, one of 2 field goals that he ended up making that day. Of course, that latter 51-yarder was for the win, and he drilled it. But turnovers were a big problem for this team, and if they were playing anyone else in the league, they probably would have lost. And the reason I say that, and it's no slight to Houston at all, but it's just not an offense that is going to beat you every single time. Houston's one of the other teams in this league that struggles with some offensive consistency. One drive they can look really good, the next drive they don't look so good. They just don't score a lot of points. San Antonio turned the ball over 4 times in that game. 4. And yet the one Houston turnover was what helped San Antonio win that game. You have to fix that turnover problem. For as good as Lovett has been, fumbles are still an issue. For as good as Morgan Ellison has been as that running back 2, stepping in for Anthony McFarland, turnovers still an issue. Fumbles still an issue. You see the numbers there with Quentin Dormady, 6 picks. Turnovers still a big problem. Jontre Kirkland, Marquez Stevenson, Cody Latimer. You have some really dynamic weapons. And again, I think I've said this for the past couple weeks now, but you probably have the best linebacker duo there with Tavante Beckett and Jordan Williams in the entire league. And you have the UFL's leading tackler right now in Jordan Mosley. He's got 58 tackles and is one of the best safeties in the league. The defense is doing what it needs to do. It hasn't allowed over 20 points in a game since they played St. Louis back in week 3, but you have to stop turning the football over. You got to go play an Arlington team that offensively is really hot, and if you turn the football over, Arlington is going to make you pay. That's going to be an interesting one. We'll talk about that later, but San Antonio still has not clinched down a playoff spot. In fact, St. Louis hasn't even clinched down a playoff spot there either, but they hold the tiebreaker over San Antonio. Due to the head-to-head record, San Antonio has got to be a team that starts to figure things out, but the Brahmas still in the top half of my power rankings there at number 4. Number 5, and staying with it there at number 5, are the DC Defenders. 3-4 is their record right now, and they are going to have some work to do in order to get into a playoff spot. They do have, maybe when you compare them to San Antonio, as we go back to that slide for a minute, Arlington, Birmingham, and St. Louis to close out the schedule. DC has St. Louis, Memphis, and Arlington. So the schedule still favors DC, but probably a game with St. Louis that you're going to have to win. If not, you got to rely on Arlington, who has had a lot of inconsistency issues this year, to go beat San Antonio. So a lot of things riding on here for DC Defenders. Not likely that they're going to end up making the playoffs, and especially now with the health of Jordan Ta'amu in big question. He took a massive hit from Breland Speaks in that last game against the Michigan Panthers. He has been a pretty solid quarterback this year. I wouldn't say he's been necessarily great or spectacular, at least when you compare him to previous seasons that Jordan Ta'amu has played, especially that of last year. Sorry, camera froze. We got it all fixed now. But Jordan Ta'amu is a real difference maker. It doesn't matter how good he is playing, how bad he is playing, how statistically just not that great compared to his season last year to where Jordan Ta'amu is this year. He's still a difference maker, and him being on the field just provides a huge dynamic to this DC team, who, again, still has not necessarily found their identity at all. And, hey, what's to make matters worse there? Jordan Ta'amu, he might be hurt. He might not be ready to go. Kelvin Harmon just went on IR as well. He is their leading receiver, and he will no longer be playing in the UFL this season. I believe that has ended his UFL regular season, going on the injured list. Defensively, they're dealing with some injuries there as well, and it's just a very inconsistent team all around. It's inconsistent offensively, it's inconsistent defensively. There's no drive sustainability on either side of the football, And for DC, in order to make the playoffs, look, you're probably going to have to win at very minimum 2 out of your next 3 games. You probably are going to have to win all 3. And not only that, you don't control your own destiny in that way because you got to rely on some of those other teams to beat San Antonio. Now, team like Birmingham and St. Louis, yeah, those are going to be hard games to win for San Antonio regardless. But Arlington, yeah, relying on Arlington to beat San Antonio might be a little bit of a shot in the dark there on that one. But for the DC defenders, how do you deal with the injuries, especially if Jordan Ta'amu is not ready to go? You have to find some consistency, some sustainability if you want to make that playoff push. We'll move on to number 6. Again, 3 teams in the UFL that boast 1-6 records. Well, boast maybe not the right terminology for that, but the Houston Roughnecks are one of those teams, and they are the best one to me, sitting there at 1-6, at least in terms of power rankings. Ended up losing that game to San Antonio, which, oh man, you should have won. You have to capitalize off of turnovers, number one thing, right? Turnovers were plentiful from the San Antonio Brahmas in that game, and Houston didn't do anything with them. Hardly at all. Now, they were able to get those 3 points before the half after a couple of penalties and things, which was big for them, but only scoring 12 points when your opponent turned the football over 4 times. And again, the late mistakes of Houston, especially that late turnover, the muffed kickoff, or I should say the fumble on the kickoff, proved to be the costly thing. Now, there's another great comeback win from San Antonio. I'm not taking any effort away from the Brahmas at all, but if you're Houston, you got to capitalize more off of those turnovers. You have to. Those are some really, really big things, and just big momentum shifting plays that you have to start taking better advantage of. Reed Sinnett did not have his best game. Jarrett Guarantano stepped in and albeit did play pretty darn good. But regardless, you got to find some consistency offensively, especially if your opponent's going to turn the football over 4 times. You have to be able to capitalize something off of that, and the defense just couldn't hold late. Reuben Foster had another game where he wasn't even really present. There only 1 tackle on the stat sheet for Reuben Foster. JT Tyler, that outside linebacker, he had a pretty good game, I believe, had 8, 9, maybe 10 tackles in that previous game. But for the Houston Roughnecks overall, we know the defensive capabilities. We know how good it can be. The 2 teams in the USFL division have already been clinched. That's the side of Birmingham and Michigan. So how much momentum can you build going into next season? Tough one against Birmingham coming up. We'll see what Houston is going to be able to do moving forward. They got to start finding some consistency on both sides of the ball, especially from some of their better players. You take a look here at the Arlington Renegades, who are at number 7. They just scored the most points in the UFL game this season with 47, and Luis Perez was outstanding. I believe he also had 3 or 4 touchdowns in that game, almost 300 yards. The run game was working as Davion Smith was really running. 2 touchdowns each to Sal Cannella and J.P. Payton. Both of those guys probably going to end up getting offers from the NFL once the season is over. Arlington has also been eliminated from playoff contention, but the offense showed out big time, and it is hot right now, and the defense was terrific on the money downs. I'm talking about 3rd downs and 4th down, and again, playing a Memphis team, especially at home, it was a great way to build that momentum and to be able to get your first win. Now, when we talk about Arlington moving forward, again, they will not have a shot to defend their spring league title, as just too many last-second losses are going to end up costing them that playoff spot. Again, the last-second loss to St. Louis, to D.C., to Michigan. You give up 10 points in the 4th quarter to San Antonio in your first meeting. You get your second meeting this upcoming Sunday. So we'll see what Arlington can do, but Luis Perez, still a very good quarterback. He's the leading passer in the UFL right now, but the defense has not really helped him out that much. Now, albeit those 23 points seem pretty misleading, because I do believe they gave up, if I'm not mistaken, 10 or 11 of those in garbage time. So the defense, for the most part, played really, really well. The offense just scored on every drive. I think they only had 2 or 3 punts, maybe 1 turnover in there as well. But Arlington offensively was electric. They were amazing. And again, when you talk about their opponent in the Memphis Showboats, well, That's just the Showboats team that ever since their week 1 win has not really played that well at all. They're sitting here at the number 8 spot. Everything is going wrong for Memphis right now. They have given up 20 or more points in 6 straight games. They've given up 32 or more points in 5 straight games. The defense is not playing well at all. It, in fact, is almost nowhere to be seen, especially last week when you give up the most points that anyone has scored in the UFL so far. To me, this just seems like a mental and physical collapse. Case Cookus, since coming back from injury, has just not looked like himself, and Troy Williams has too much of a turnover problem to be reliable on a consistent basis. Darius Victor has a game where he plays well and then doesn't play well. You do have a lot of these wide receivers that play well on a fairly consistent basis, talking about Dawood Davis, Jonathan Adams, Sage Surratt when he wants to be is a pretty good option, but this defense is not getting production at all. The offense is not consistent at all. And this is just a full-blown nightmare scenario for Memphis right now. Nothing with this team is working. Nothing with this team is going well. And I hate to do it to all the Showboat fans out there. I really don't have many positive things to say about this Memphis Showboats team. I guess if you want a positive thing, if Case Cookus can get healthy, this offense can start to get rolling. And the defense, I think, has enough talented pieces to be able to bounce back and to be able to string together at least one good performance in these final 3 games. But when you talk about the overall picture for the Memphis Showboats, after starting out with a win in that week 1 game, they were looking to, albeit they probably didn't play their best football in week 1 anyway, but everything went downhill after that heartbreaking loss to St. Louis. You can't help but think, what happens if the result of that game is just a little bit different? If San Antonio ends up turning the ball over, or if Memphis's defense can make a play, or something like that. Now, obviously, that didn't happen. We can go through the what ifs all day long. But talking about this Memphis team is as simple as it's a nightmare. Right now, for this group, we'll see if they can get one more win before the season's end. Memphis is the bottom team in my power rankings right now. That's going to do it for the power rankings portion of this video. Let's dive on into the prediction portion of this video. Starting out with the games taking place on Saturday, we are talking about the Memphis Showboats and the Arlington Renegades. I apologize. No, we aren't. Those were last week's games. We're still talking about the Memphis Showboats first, but now they are playing the Michigan Panthers. Forgot to delete those graphics, so I do apologize for that. But the Memphis Showboats and the Michigan Panthers are your first game coming up here Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox from Ford Field in Detroit. Michigan has already locked up a playoff spot, so can the Showboats string together yet another win? Well, we'll see what happens. For the Showboats to win this game, hey, by the way, before we do start, all lines and odds are as of recording this video. The healthier quarterback is going to get the start here. It seems like Troy Williams is going to be that guy that gets the start, but he was a little banged up this last week. We know Case Cookus is still trying to battle his way back from that injury. So if Troy Williams isn't ready to go, Case Cookus will. If Case Cookus is still injured, Troy Williams will go. Regardless, it doesn't matter who's playing a quarterback here. The healthier option will go. Just whoever the coaching staff deems is healthier and more in game-like conditions will start. They need to find a rhythm. They need to find it early. Now, again, they can't do everything. Darius Victor is going to have to provide some life in the run game. But you have to find a rhythm. You have to avoid turnovers. And this is a very physical Michigan team. You have to be able to win physicality in some forms. We know it's not going to happen all the time. They have to do it sometimes. The defense especially has to find some sort of a pass rush, especially against this Panther team. Force Michigan to throw the ball. And maybe not even just a pass rush, but create havoc in the backfield, period. Let that defensive front through. Get pressure. Force Michigan backwards, which is something that the Showboats, I think, you're going to have some trouble doing here. But you need to force the Panthers quarterbacks to throw, and you need to lock up Sims. Sims is their one really good dynamic weapon, and everyone else, they get targets every now and again, but it's mainly Marcus Sims. The Samson Nakua ended up having a pretty good game last week. He was not on the Michigan Panthers stat line, but Look, this is the Michigan team that is still trying to find out some quarterback consistency of their own. Memphis can take advantage of that by creating havoc in the backfield, slowing down this run game, and forcing these quarterbacks to throw the ball. Now, albeit Perkins was pretty darn good this past week, and Brian Lewerke definitely had some pretty good moments as well. One of those two guys are going to get the start here in week 8. Can one of them provide quarterback consistency? Again, Perkins, I believe, was 11 for 13 this past week or something like that. Camera's frozen again. 1 second. I apologize. I don't know how long that had been frozen for, but regardless, we're going to keep moving forward. Lewerke or Perkins, they need to provide quarterback consistency. We saw what Matt Colburn can do. Great. He was really, really good. We have seen before what Wes Hills can do, and we know how dynamic of a weapon Marcus Sims is. We know how physical this offensive line is, how physical this defensive line is, and that is one of the other keys as well. Let the physical advantage take over on both sides of the ball and pound the rock. If Memphis can't slow down this run game, it's going to be a long game for Showboat fans, and that exactly I think it is going to be. I don't think the Showboats are going to have much luck with anything at all. 34-23 is where I see this one shaping out. The Showboat defense has just been nowhere to be seen. The 30-point mark is what other teams have hit against them on a consistent basis. The last time these two teams played, it was 35-18 Michigan. I'm going with a little bit of a tighter game here at home for Michigan. I could just as easily see this one, though, being a lot bigger of a margin. I think the Showboats are going to find a couple things here that work now that there's, not that there was any pressure over the previous 5 or 6 weeks, but the Showboats are going to start to find some things here, but it won't be enough. It won't nearly be enough. The Panthers will win this game in Ford Field. Game 2 of Week 8 takes us to Birmingham, Alabama on ESPN2 on Saturday night. The Birmingham Stallions, a team that has clinched a playoff spot, the only undefeated team left in the league, will get their second and final matchup against the Houston Roughnecks this season. We know what the Stallions can do, but a couple things that I want to talk about with the Stallions first to just improve upon as they are getting into their playoff form. You got to keep some consistent drives. There were a couple times where Martinez and company got a little bit off base, so keep consistent drives, control the clock. Physicality on the line of scrimmage is going to be tested in this game against Houston, especially on the offensive line for Birmingham, because that Houston defense is very, very aggressive, and they can be very, very punishing. And for Birmingham as well, clean up the special teams mistakes. There were quite a bit of those last week that gave St. Louis some shorter fields, which helped them go score. For Birmingham, you have to be able to limit those mistakes, especially moving forward. Those aren't necessarily keys for this game, although they are some things that you need to watch. Birmingham's just got to do their thing. Adrian Martinez has got to play well. The running back duo is going to be good. The defense will force some tackle for losses. That in and of enough, playing good, sound, fundamental football with how talented Birmingham is will make it difficult for the Roughnecks to win. However, these are some things that the Roughnecks can do. The rush game is going to struggle, so you have to throw to win. Whether it's Guarantano or Reed Sinnett or anyone else who plays quarterback, you have to throw the ball to win this game. You're not going to be able to run for 200 yards on this Birmingham team. No one has been, no one will. What can you do through the air with your wide receiver weapons? That is going to make a big difference. You also have to be able to keep Adrian Martinez contained. You cannot allow Adrian Martinez to be able to do whatever he wants in that pocket. So while I mean contained, don't let Martinez get out and run, but also get that pocket small. Make Adrian Martinez have to throw in these tight windows. Just let him, you have to keep him from affecting the game as much as possible. That's a big key for Houston here. Slow down the potential UFL MVP Adrian Martinez, but can the big playmaker step up defensively? I'm talking about the guy, especially by the name of Reuben Foster. He was really good over the first couple of weeks, had a pretty darn good performance in week 6, I do believe it was. But really, for a lot of this season, he's probably one of the best raw defensive talents in the UFL. The stat sheet really has not shown it, at least to the best of his ability. So can him and a lot of these other playmakers step up defensively, make some plays, force some turnovers, and get the Stallions backpedaling? I don't think so. Birmingham is just way too talented, guys. There is no way else to say that in the world. Like, there's just nothing else that I can say to justify this even more. Birmingham has more talent, they have more superior talent, and they're going to make things hard for Houston to win this game, period. End of story. The Houston Roughnecks will lose to the Birmingham Stallions. 31-13 is the score that I have here as Birmingham improves to 8-0 and continues their undefeated season. All right, those are the two games that are being played on Saturday. We'll move into the two games being played on Sunday, which in my opinion are definitely a lot more interesting games. You got this one right here, which, if you remember how their first meeting went, it did not go well. And specifically, it didn't go well for DC at all. It was a 45-12 thrashing by the St. Louis Battlehawks, and they did that on the road. Imagine how bad this game could get out of hand if some of the similar things that were happening in that game for DC and St. Louis happen here. St. Louis has the best home field advantage in the UFL. This is going to be a really hard one for DC to win, especially because the injuries are really starting to pile up here. I already talked about Kelvin Harmon being on the injured list with his UFL regular season likely, if not already confirmed, to be done. Joran Teamu took that big hit from Breland Speaks, and if not for the third quarterback rule, basically saying if the third string quarterback goes in, the starter is not allowed to come back, Joran Teamu says that he would have played. Okay, how healthy is the coaching staff going to deem him to be? Because Jordan Ta'amu is as competitive of a guy as we have in this league. AJ McCarron is another super competitive guy that you see on the other side of the ball. We'll talk about him later. But is Jordan Ta'amu ready to go? And if he isn't, can McClendon move the offense as well as Jordan Ta'amu can? Now, again, there have been some inconsistency issues on both sides of the ball for DC this year. Yes, we know that. But Jordan Ta'amu, when he plays, just gives a different dynamic to this offense. If McClendon is going to be the guy that starts, we need to see what sort of dynamic he can bring to this offense, because there has to be something. And you have to generate big plays against St. Louis, especially with how good this defense has been playing as of late, maybe minus last week against Birmingham. But again, in my book at least, you get a pass because it's the Birmingham Stallions. Whoever plays quarterback has to find that rhythm. I think if it's Ta'amu, DC has a better shot to win this game than if McClendon were at quarterback, and that's no slight to McClendon. It's just the edge and the dynamic that I've seen Ta'amu bring to this team in the past. McClendon went 9 of 14, had a pretty decent day there against Michigan, but I didn't necessarily see a different dynamic. The defense is going to need to limit this rush game, and I say that because you might think, well, wait a minute. AJ McCarron is another guy that could possibly win the UFL MVP, right? He's a really good quarterback, right? Why wouldn't you key in on this pass game? Well, AJ might not play, especially with the Battlehawks probably in a pretty good position to clinch that playoff spot. I believe they will do so if they get a win here against the DC Defenders. They will clinch that first playoff spot out of the XFL conference. Now, look, it's hard to think that AJ McCarron is not going to play. I have just read some things with the signing of Drew Plitt that AJ probably is not going to play this game. Would it surprise me if he did? No, not at all. But the run game is even better than ever. Now, whoever throws the ball here, there are too many dynamic weapons for the Battlehawks to not worry about this pass game. But the reason I say the DC defense needs to limit this rush game, especially if AJ McCarron doesn't play, is the run game has been as good as it's ever been. Now, Mateo Durant, once he recovers and comes back from injury, is going to provide another dynamic. Wayne Gallman hasn't really started to get it going, but Jacob Sailors has, and he's been really, really good for this Battlehawk team. Okay, focus in on that run game. Defensively, if you are the Battlehawks now, get into that backfield. It doesn't matter if it's Ta'amu or McClendon. If it's Ta'amu, well, I'm not one to re-injure someone, but if you are St. Louis and you see Ta'amu back there, you're definitely going to want to create some pressure and test Ta'amu's health. And look, even if Ta'amu plays in this game, he might not fully be 100%. If you're St. Louis, get in that backfield. Limit what DC can do in the run game, especially if it's Jordan Ta'amu back there. Really, no matter who it is playing quarterback, whether it's Ta'amu or McClendon, you have to be able to get into that backfield and disrupt and create some pressure. Exactly what they were able to do in that pass game against DC in Audi Field. But I said it earlier, I think St. Louis has got way too many weapons. And with all the injuries that DC has, especially to its best receiver in Kelvin Harmon, I just don't see any way that St. Louis doesn't win this game. Now, I do have them barely beating that 7.5-point spread, but I really, really do like this Battlehawks team. They showed us a lot of good things this past week. I think regardless, DC makes this a closer game than that 45-12 thrashing. I don't think we're going to see anything like that again, but I do really like what this Battlehawks team has, and with how beat up DC is, with Ta'amu maybe not being at 100% with their best wide receiver on the injured list, yeah, I do not really think the defenders have much of a chance to win this game. Give me the Battlehawks. And for the final game here, this one to me is very, very interesting. May have tipped my cap a little bit, but just in case I didn't, we'll go through things here. It's the Renegades and Brahmas in Week 8. Could be a very important game for the San Antonio Brahmas, as long as St. Louis is able to win that game against DC, and San Antonio wins this game against Arlington, I believe that clinches them as a playoff spot. And the Brahmas, rightfully so, are the favorites here. They've been another really good surprise team this year, and the Renegades have just not been that great. So you would figure this is a game that the Brahmas should be able to win. Maybe not super handedly, given what we know about this Renegades offense, but win, period. I'll tell you why it's going to be a little bit of a bigger deal. We're going to start with the Brahmas because the ball goes back to Quentin Dormady. The last time that he played against this Renegades team, 3 picks. 3 picks. So let's see what improves here. Dormady just didn't look great in that past game against Houston at all. That's why they ended up going to that, what would that be, the 3rd string quarterback after Chase Garbers went down. Then it was Dormady and then Hogan. But the ball is going to go back to Quentin Dormady here. Let's see what improves. Is he going to limit those turnovers? Is he going to start finding his weapons with a little bit more consistency? Things like that. I can't wait to see what gets better. The defense has to be ready for anything, and I mean anything, because let's move up to the first bullet point for the Renegades for a second. This offense is hot. It is lightning hot. It is fire hot, red hot, whatever it is you want to say, lava hot, core of the earth hot. This is an offense that I think generated a ton of momentum from this past week. Luis Perez is a phenomenal quarterback with a lot of fantastic weapons. They just need to avoid those setbacks. So no turnovers for the Renegades, no super big losses, no big penalties. As long as that happens, this offense, I think, is going to score quite a bit of points. But the defense has got to be ready for anything for the Brahmas, because this is an offense for Arlington that just looks really, really good right now. The same can't necessarily be said about the other side of the ball, although the defense probably had one of its better performances last week against Memphis. But the defense is going to need to buckle up down the stretch. That is what has cost Arlington so many games. It's what eventually will cost them a spot in the playoffs. Well, I guess what has cost them a spot in the playoffs to defend their spring league title. And the last time they played this Brahmas team, there was a tie game in the 4th quarter, and then a lot of mistakes, some penalties, some miscues. They allowed 10 points in the 4th, and San Antonio is able to win on the road. But the upset potential is here with how hot the offense is and with all the potential talent on this defensive side. There is more than enough for Arlington to be able to win this game. For the Brahmas, though, you can't afford turnovers or any sort of mistakes, especially against an offense that is playing as well as Arlington's is. This is going to be an absolutely fascinating game that I absolutely cannot wait to watch, and I'm going to go ahead and take my shot in the dark, which is kind of what I believe I said earlier in this video when I talked about this game a little bit. I'm going to take my shot in the dark here. If 3 interceptions is going to be present again for Quentin Dormady, if another 4 turnover game is going to be present, Arlington is going to take full advantage of that. This offense is too good to not capitalize on at least 1, maybe if not 2, depending on how many turnovers the Brahmas have, all of them. Now, I know I'm sort of counting on the Brahmas to have another shaky game offensively here, but I do see Arlington picking up their second straight win here, and especially if DC is able to beat St. Louis, well, things are going to get very interesting in the XFL conference. However, when I go ahead and take a look at this game, I just think that Arlington, with that red hot offense, to whatever mistakes San Antonio makes, of which there have been a lot of them the past couple weeks, the Renegades will take advantage. They will win their game. I think they pull off the upset on the road against San Antonio. I know, little bit of a shot in the dark, shall I say, kind of a bold prediction here for this week. But let me know what you guys think about the UFL here. We are winding it down, and playoffs are almost on the horizon. Again, continue to stay tuned on my channel for college football content. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. Sorry for all the graphical errors and camera issues that I had today, but I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.